Hey Sim Racers, this is Larry at TJRSim, and today we're going to do a review on the next level racing motion platform V3. This is the version V3. This is the third iteration, hence V3. This one is actually 200% faster than the version 1 that came out, and of course it is boxed up in boxed up with the power supply and everything inside. It's very neat and tidy. Similar to the V2, but the V3 is black, where the V2 was red. V2 was not on the market very long, I believe around 9 months or something like that, and then the V3 came out shortly after. So don't know why, but that's what happened. Whatever they did it right, because this unit is fantastic. So together, when you get it in the box, it's 62 pounds. Shipped. So, let's just say you got into motion and then later on you decided to, get out of sim racing. This is actually a really easy package, save your boxing, to package back up and resell on eBay or something later down the road to get some money back, as opposed to something humongous like the Sim Experience full motion rig and stuff like that. I mean, this is a very small form factor to get you into motion on virtually any sim racing rig that you may already have. As we have it here, I have it married to the Fanatec K2 rig, and using, of course, the V3 motion. So I got basically the best two products, I believe, for the price point on the market. Actually, the Fanatec K2 rig, check out my review on that one. That's the best money you can get, best rig you can get for the money, and really I don't know how they sell it so cheap, because it's really good. But anyway, on to the V3. I'm going to get into how everything goes together with marrying the two parts together, and then we'll get into the software side of things on the PC and show you all the ins and outs of the PC. I'm going to show you and try to remember to tell you the things that you won't see in other videos, so you want to stay tuned to the end so you don't miss anything. And then we'll get on with it. So just a quick recap of this system here. What I have is, of course, the Fanatec K2 rig with the GT Ultimate side panels that come with the V3 motion, and I'm using an R-seat that I had from an old R-seat Evo rig. So yeah, it's three different brands here together. So this is probably a perfect situation for people that are the junkyard dogs out there that are trying to marry a bunch of parts together. That's the beauty of sim racing, is you can get all the parts you want or reuse parts you have, and the V3 fits right in there. You can pretty much put it with any rig you want, with just a little bit of ingenuity and thought process put into it. So just a quick note, is this thing awesome? It is amazing, guys and gals that are watching. It's when you couple VR, of course you're in the VR, you're in your car, you're looking around, you're having a blast, and then you add in the small cues the transducers give you, like for curbing and engine RPM and stuff like that, coupled with motion. It's pure bliss. It is amazing. You're not going to want to drive any other way. In fact, when you get this thing, you're probably going to want to take about a week off of work just to stay at home playing this thing. So yeah, it's really, really fun, really engaging, and the immersion factor goes up to 100%. So it is the last piece of the puzzle, I believe, is the motion. And this is now only at 2 degrees of freedom at 2 DOF, but it does a really good job of simulating everything that you need to simulate in racing. So, all right, let's get into. I'm going to pause it, and then we're going to come back and we'll get into the assembly of it, marrying the two parts. That part's pretty quick, and then we'll go on into the software. So let's get into the assembly part of this, putting it together. The unit. The V3 unit, I'm not going to show you that. I'll maybe post some pictures on the video, but the still pics of it. But it's really easy. I mean, it's 3 bolts, comes with 2 side panels. You screw them to the motor itself, and you're done. And then obviously you also, let me get in here. This is the butt kicker mount for the Gamer 2. I actually have my cords and stuff zip tied to it because I don't use the Gamer 2 anymore. But yeah, you can mount that on there, and I'll put a still picture in there. But you see those bolts in there? They're actually a real pain to get in because your hand, if you're like me, it's hard to get in here and hold a wrench. You can see how the lack of space you have to hold an Allen wrench in here. And then the way they suggested is put the Allen head on this side and put the screw and the washer on the other side. Virtually impossible. Plus you have little vents in here you don't want to drop your washers into the motor. So if you do it that way, I would put a towel or something over it so you don't drop it in their motor. But I found it best to actually put the socket head cap screw in from this back side of the bracket and spin the nut and washer on this side, and I can hold it with an Allen head key. If you got little hands, it's going to be a lot easier for you. If you got bigger hands like me, then it's a pain. But it's totally doable to get it on there. And I didn't really need it, but it came with it. Didn't want to store it anywhere. So, and if I do want to add a game or two later on, I might as well already have it on there. So, but yeah, fairly easy. That's the only thing that takes a little bit of time to put on. Like I said, I only struggled with it a little bit because I have bigger hands just to physically try to hold the wrenches. But anyway, to marry the two together, my dog's whining. Lay down, girl. Lay down, girl. To marry the two together is really easy. And what I used is I went out, and you see these little posts here. These are actually 1 1/4 square tubing by 36 inches long. I cut it in half, spray painted it in black, and that was it. That's really all you need. They already come pre-drilled with holes that'll fit 1/4 inch bolts. I'll get you a package of bolts like this. You only need 4. This one's a 1/4 inch, 20 by 3.5, which would work great for the back side to go through here. And this one, this bolt I have here is a 4-inch bolt. And as you can see, it's a little bit too long, so you could go with 4 3.5s if you wanted to. But yeah, it works good. I actually, being impatient, I got a box of washers and then sized them all out and had this rig all the way close up into one of this furthest back hole, right? And it tended to have a teeter-totter effect to it, so I didn't like that, obviously. And then if I moved it all the way forward where you had more support, it worked great on there. But it was way too close for me being 6 foot tall. Now my daughter, 5 foot to 5'5". I think she's actually like 5'1" or something like that. Put it all the way forward and she can reach the pedals just perfect. But me being 6 foot, it's too close. So if you're shorter stature, you can utilize the bolting holes closer up for your Fanatec K2 rig, which is nice. But if you're taller, you're going to want to, of course, obviously, like I did, extend it further back. Now, keep in mind, this bolt is a 1/2 inch up from the ground. And if you buy this here already pre-drilled, it's 3/4 of an inch up off the ground. So you do have a little bit of, you could possibly have a little bit of wobble. I don't believe I'll notice it as a problem on my rig. Being that it's sitting here on carpet, it's a lot easier to take up any gaps and stuff in it. But 1.5 is actually a little bit too wide. It tends to put a little bit of extra force on this side panel. So I'd go with 1 1/4. But you could go to just a solid piece of 1 1/4 without pre-drilled holes and drill the holes, a 1/2 inch up at the distance you want. And another one here, which is actually this one here, which is 3/4 of an inch up, which is how this is. So yeah, you got a little bit of offset as far as bolt hole patterns go to deal with, but it's super easy to do. And if you're doing it on wood floors or something like that, you're going to want it a little bit more exact than if you're messing around with it on carpet. So that's an option. Get a pack of bolts, get you 4 of them. This is a pack of 2. 1/4 inch bolts, some flat washers, and some nuts, and some square tubing. 1 1/4 inch square tubing fits the space in here perfectly. That's all you need. and cut it to your length desired, and that's it. Even if you're a shorter person, you're going to want to use the square tubing to take up that length, because this unit is a lot wider than what your Semitech K2 unit is there. So it's really easy. Now, after you figured out how to marry these two parts together, and you want to mount your seat up. Now, another option you could have done is, see, here's the Semitech K2 back half, right? Now, I thought about initially, this is another option you could do. If you're playing in VR, it's not such a big deal because your center of your headset, being in VR, it doesn't, you're centered in perfectly anyway. But if I was to put that unit on top of here, you can just imagine how much higher up in the air it's going to be. On the Semitech K2, my wheel is up as high as it can go now. And if I was to go up that other 4 inches in the air, it's going to be too high. I'm going to be literally kind of grabbing at a downward angle. And I actually even still angled up my wheel just a little bit the way I have it now, because it does set a little bit higher off the ground than what it did on my K2 back half. So, that's just an issue that all sim rigs will have. Now, if you were to get the the GT Ultimate rig with the seat and the whole unit, of course, it all marries together just fine, and their unit, of course, adjusts accordingly. That's why this unit set so low, actually, is just so they'll get the right height on their unit. But when you're trying to marry it with a different unit like I am doing, got to do a little bit of ingenuity, a little bit of finagling, a little trial and error to get the height that you want. Right now, the height is pretty perfect for me. If I took the cushion out of the seat, then I would set a little bit lower. But this seat hurts my butt, so I'll go get a pack of cushions and then put them in there. So, but anyway, that works good this way. Another option you could do is, and if you were going to mount this onto here, being that the GT Ultimate is so wide, it's basically wider than this unit here, you would have to get a plate and put a plate that comes out so you can mount the unit, the bottom part of these legs, out here. And it's about, I don't know, it was about another inch out to where you would mount them. So that's another thing you would have to contend with. So I found that it was just much simpler to ditch the back half of the K2 unit and just use the GT Ultimate side panels for what they were designed to do, which is to hold your butt up off the ground. And just put a 1/4 inch, 1 1/4 inch bar in between them to marry them together, so when you hitting the brakes, it doesn't want to pivot up on you. It works perfectly this way. So that's the simplest way to do it, and to where your seat isn't too high up in the air. And when you have strong pedals like I do, like the V3 pedals there, because I have a little bit more, I got the force dialed up on them, even though I still got the brake kit right there I got to put on. But yeah, you can get some pivoting action. So you want to use 2 bolts to get it, even, and of course held down properly. So that works great. I just left the old my gym legs there on there just to kind of show y'all options here before I put these on. I'm going to actually put these on there, and I'm going to probably move my seat back a little bit further than I have it now. Although now I still have to have my slider and slide it forward right now. But when I do regular gaming, I would like to set a little bit further from my monitor. So I'm going to use these so I can have my unit further back. And the beauty of using something like this, of course, you can drill your holes where you want to in regular square tubing, or you can have, this set up and just slide it to the next hole using the back screw. You leave your front half screwed in, unscrew this, slide your unit back, pick another hole, put the bolt in, you're done. So real good, real easy. I think that's okay. So that's not it, all of it. Now the next thing up is your chair. Now I recommend, this is the R seat chair right here. I recommend that you use a bottom mount chair for one reason, for one thing. If you use the side mount rail, here's a side mount rail. Here's my side mounts, so to speak. And that works. The problem is, let me remember what the problem is. Okay, so I didn't use these because it raised it up another inch, or a little bit higher up than I wanted, because I didn't have enough adjustment, enough holes rather, on this particular side plate. If I had a side plate where the holes went down a little bit lower, I would have probably used this, just because I like the look of the side plates. So if you had like a universal Sparko or something like that, you could use it. But another issue that came in hand was that the spacing of these of the unit itself. Let me see if I can get in here. This is the rod that pivots the whole machine. This is the bracket that's part of the V3 unit. This is my slider right here that you mount on top of it. Now, if you're going to use their GT Ultimate seat, they come with a bracket that bolts here to this, and then the seat spacing is further out here, and it bolts down to the seat. So when I'm using these brackets, I actually couldn't get them in enough with these particular brackets to hold it down to this unit here and the seat without putting it all in a bind. So it was just easier for me to mount the seat directly to here. Now, this isn't a bottom mount seat, but you just drill some holes in it and put some washers and you're fine. So that's what I did. Now, go around to the front here and see that little spacer right there. If you're gonna direct mount your seat, you can see the lip of this seat hangs down really close to my adjuster, right? So you're gonna have to use a spacer. Now my seat rails actually came with a spacer, and so I put it on the front, left it flush on the back, just to raise it up. So when I use my adjuster right there, the adjuster is of course clearing the seat and plenty of room clearing the box. Okay. I actually had to bend this adjuster arm down a little bit too. Oh, and a quick note, put your adjuster arm on before you put your seat on, because it is a pain in the butt to do it any other way. Just a little side note. But yeah, if you're going to do a bottom mount seat, you're going to want to have to use a spacer. Mine came with a spacer, I was able to use the regular bolting for it that came with it, but that came with this slider assembly. But if you were to add another spacer, to say you wanted to add more rake, or you made your own Delron spacer or something like that, a plastic spacer, any material would work. Or you could use a bunch of washers for that matter if you wanted to have this seat angled up more. Then of course you're gonna have to source out a longer bolt to fit. And I may angle this seat up. I may do that myself just to have a little bit of a back angle, because right now it's pretty much straight up and down, which is, for ergonomic wise, you want to keep your back straight anyway. So it works pretty good. And my pedal height is a little bit lower than my hip height, which it seems very natural to me at that stage. So it just depends on how you want it, how short or tall you are, so you can adjust to your liking. Anyway, these are just little small things that you run into when you're marrying things together, and things that go through your mind of okay, I want this to feel comfortable to me, because I'm going to probably be sitting in this for hours at a time. So now I've played this unit here for 4 hours at a time. Never gets hot. It never overheats. It never decreases in its performance or anything. It's just like bulletproof. I want to say it just keeps on ticking, man. So it's really, really good, strong unit. So, but anyway, I don't want to get too far into the part of the review part of it, of the unit, of how impressed I am of it. This part is, of course, just covering the assembly. Hopefully I gave you enough information where you have enough idea of what you're facing if you're using a Fanatec K2 rig, or any other rig for that matter, maybe the R seats or something like that. Now, if you bought R seats, you can actually contact R seat and they'll send you side panels at work. Now, I have noticed that their seat assembly sets up quite a bit higher with their side panel setup, but the one guy's review I saw on it, he was able to raise his wheel up enough because it has some articulating flanges in there where you can articulate your wheel base up this way and then slide your wheel angle up to where you get it pretty high. So that works out fine for that particular case. But it is nice that RC, I mean, they sell their full motion rig with the D-box setup, but they still will make side panels for you to work for the competitor's motion. So that says a lot for them as well. And also shows you how popular this unit is when you have other companies making side plates for them. I haven't seen it on their website, but you just have to contact them, is my understanding on it. But the K2 to me is a bulletproof rig, and it's probably the simplest. After I spent some time troubleshooting how to marry the two together, it's the simplest to hook them up. So, not to make this too long, but yeah, 1 1/4 inch tubing, 36 inch long. Cut it in half, drill your holes where you want it, and be done with it. You're done. You're rocking and rolling. So if you order this unit, swing by Lowe's, get you some 1 1/4 inch tubing. 4 inch long, 1/4 inch 20 UNC bolts with 4 nuts and some big flat washers that go on there. And before you even try to assemble this thing, and then boom, you're done. You can assemble it, get it up and running, and you'll be done within 30 minutes of hooking it all up. So yeah, it's pretty good. All right, so next up, let's get into the software. The software side will be a little bit long. This whole video is going to be long, but if you're interested in motion, you're going to want to stay tuned. So, and I'll try to leave some description links where you can skip ahead to each section you want to. So, next up, of course, will be the software. Okay, Sim Racers. So now we're getting on to the software part. So, getting into the software, all you do is first, actually, what you do is plug in the power cord to your V3 unit, and then plug in the USB from your V3 unit to your PC. Turn your power on. Your V3 unit will do a little bit of motion, usually a forward to backwards motion. Don't worry, it's not going to throw you out of the seat. And then it's a self-calibration. Sometimes it does it to the side, sometimes it does it forward, but that's what happens. Windows will recognize the device and download the appropriate drivers. Nothing for you to do there. After that, you come to the website that you see here, Next Level Racing, and you can go over to support and then customer support right there. Now, where you want to pay attention to is find your motion platform serial number. So this doesn't really this site can be a little bit confusing, I think, because it's saying email support and stuff, and but here it has drivers and software downloads and drivers and software. So you may kind of wonder, which one do I click on? So click on find your motion platform serial number. It's going to download. I'll just click it. You'll see it. It downloads get serial number. When you run that, it's going to find the serial number on your V3 motion rig. Now, if you have not recorded your serial number, guess what? It's at the very bottom of your V3 motion rig. So this is a handy little tool because most people, even myself included, forgot all about it, and I even knew about it going into it, but I was so excited I forgot to take a picture of it. So take a picture of it first just so you'll have it on your own, but this will pull the serial number. After it pulls the serial number, you go over to drivers and software, and the serial number, it'll pop up a little dialog box here with the serial number. You will copy that serial number, paste it right here, and hit submit. Once you hit submit, the software for this motion rig will download. I'm not going to go through that right now, but that's what happens. And then that's it. That's all you have to do with the Next Level Racing. What will come up next is this. I took screenshots of each thing. It'll say welcome to your platform manager. It goes over some of the details of it. You can pause it and read this if you want to. It also has a user manual that you can download, the online user manual. After you hit next, the next screen comes up, your VR headway and tactile feedback. It explains briefly what that's about. Like the VR headway uses advanced mathematical formulas to calculate necessary compensation that is applied to VR headset at runtime. Okay, whatever that means. No. But basically what that means is, like, if you're on the banking at Daytona and your seat will literally lean, let's say you're going around the track to the left, your seat will lean to the left. When you have the VR headway on, when you're using your VR headset, your head will stay more centered on towards where the steering wheel is. Now, it does still allow you to look around the cockpit, move your head forward and backwards and all that. All that still works just fine in VR. It just self-centers your head instead of your head looking or leaning all the way to the window itself, the side windows itself. So that's what that does. Pretty cool, actually, that it does that. And then it, of course, tells you then next here how to set up your VR, as far as you measure basically from the center of the motion rig to the top of your head, or really to your eyesight is what it is. And you want to get this one fairly close. And then, of course, next is the tactile feedback. This one also does use tactile feedback if you have like a Gamer 2, which you can attach to the back on the mount that's provided that we already went over. And or you can be like me and have 6 transducers, you know. So I believe it controls up to 8. But it only utilizes one sound card, which is different than SimVibe, where you would have one sound card for 2 channels, which would then you could run 4 butt kickers off of the 2 channels, you know, like front 2 and the rear 2. This one, it wants you to connect all of them to the one sound card, which I did not do. I just used my default 4 of them in chassis mode on this setup here, just because I didn't want to unhook it all from how I have it set up in SimVibe, because not every game, as we get through this, I'll show you, not every game supports tactile feedback in the software, at least not yet. That it was a new addition to this. Here is the different dashboards. After you hit next again, here's the different dashboards it gives you. The gamer dashboard that everybody's probably used to seeing if they've looked at any videos. This other one is more of a commercial application dashboard. Don't really know what's going on here, but it shows you the current position of your motors and stuff, of what's it doing. And then, of course, you can adjust and tools and diagnostic and software settings to change between these 2 dashboards. All right, next is you will come up with this action center. And of course, you see this dashboard, the more of the in-home use dashboard going on here. That's what you'll see. But it will automatically recognize all the games that you have on your system. So all you simply do is click configure, 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 and configure, and it configures the software to do the action needed for it. It's just a simple click, goes through it, it's real fast. You'll know you need to do that because if you hit X on here, you'll see this action center, 19 in this case, being that you have 19 games that need to get configured for motion. And it just reads the telemetry off just like SimVibe would for your transducers, reading the telemetry, just like your wheel does as well. So next, you will see the game has been configured. So after you hit configure, this is what pops up. Hit OK, and just do that for each one. See, this wizard will install firmware on your platform. Your motion platform is recommended to suggest firmware version. It will also go through for a firmware update if needed. It'll tell you, and that'll be in the action center, and just hit install and go through that. Next, this is just the next screen. It shows you that it flashed it and all that. If you're semi used to reflashing for your Fanatec wheel or any kind of driving wheel, it's kind of the same thing. It's just plug and play, really. It's really easy to do. Here's where you get into setting up your VR headset. So you'll want to get out a tape measure at this point, and you will measure, everything's in millimeters. So And it has a little diagram. If you click on each one of these diagrams, obviously this is a screenshot, so it's a little bit smaller, but if you click on each one of these diagrams, they pop up fairly big for you to see what's going on. But they're both telling you the same story. All it's wanting is your height from the, what is the top frame rotation center can be improved, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so all it wants is your height from the rig itself. I actually measured it from the butt kicker. How do you say it? See, the butt kicker, where you hook the butt kicker Gamer 2 around the little round shaft there. That's where I measured from, and I measured all the way up to the top of my seat, because at the top of my seat was really where my eye level was, and that made it easy to run the tape measure up the back of my seat to get a proper measurement. And I punched that in here in millimeters. Now, if you're someone that leans forward a lot or back a lot, basically your head not on center of the rig, you'll want to key that in too. For me, I didn't have to do that because I set on center. All right, next. That's the same thing. You just want to click the allow the motion compensation in games. Click that on. Now I will note to you that I did have some VR. It'll pop up saying your game is now VR enabled when you're in the game, when you launch the game. And I did occasionally have that repop up over and over saying that it lost the VR enabled and then it found the VR enabled. That was on Project Cars 2. I'd see that every once in a while. And then on Race Room, actually, I had a problem launching the game with it on. It would crash out in the beginning, but I would launch the game with this off, and it would launch fine, and I'd come into the software, turn it on, and the VR compensation was on. I didn't really need it in Race Room. I mean, obviously, if we're doing some banking or something, heavy banking, or 40-degree banking, then you would need it. But for normal driving, I didn't really need it. Alright, so this is the same there. Okay, so this is kind of the menu system, and I'll get into this in the actual software. But I took some pictures of it, basically. Alright, so let's close that out, and let's look at the software itself. And I also want to give you a diagram. And actually, first, let's look at this diagram here. And you're going to want to take a snapshot of this or a screenshot of this, because this explains everything to you. This is, of course, for Project Cars 2. I named it Experiment. It comes preloaded with, obviously the different games, Project Cars 2, Race Room, all the games that you have. But you can actually clone it, clone the one that it has, and create your own settings. Default, everything's at 1 all the way down. Well, 1's very roller coaster like. It really chunks you around. It's okay for like dirt racing to be up a little bit higher, but road racing is a little bit extreme for me. So you can actually look at these values here that I have, and it's a pretty good go by. What to set it as is kind of like a beginning setting that I would recommend. Now you want to, of course, consider how heavy you are as a person, and then how heavy your seat is. If you're using like the GT Ultimate seat, that's like 55 pounds or something like that. No, is it that heavy? Yeah, it's actually really heavy. My seat's 25 pounds, so it's half the weight. So I tend to turn things down a little bit because, well, I'm a 6 foot, 238 pound guy, so it's it's got to push me around plus the seat weight, right? It doesn't have a problem doing it. This is never strained. It actually handles up to 285 pound person, and I don't know if that considers the seat weight as well. I would imagine it did, but yeah, it's actually pretty freaking strong. It can really throw you around. So, but copy these settings down here, and I'm going to go over them real quick. Now, other games do have different settings, and I'll show you that as well. And if you look here, this top chart, it kind of tells you what's going on. I actually recommend you turn everything off, except overall intensity, leave it at 1, and then just turn up one setting all the way to the max. Max is from 0 to 250, 2.50. and then go out on track and see what it does. And that way it gives you a clear indication in your mind what each setting's doing. That's what I did, and hence here is the explanation for them. But let me explain it to you anyways, and hopefully this graph will help you in your settings, because you probably refer back to it until you get accustomed to the settings of the software. Overall intensity is basically the overall intensity of all these settings below it. So that one's an easy one. If you like how your bump and your roll and your heave and surge and so on feel, but you just want a little bit more of everything, you'll just bump this up. Or if you want to tone it down a little bit, tone it down to a negative value. Bump intensity, that one's easy. It's basically small bumps, bumps that you'll feel over like off-roading or rally racing and like Project Cars 2. That's the one that handles that. It's not sensitive enough to feel curbing. You're going to want to use transducers for that. So forget about curbing. It's not sensitive enough to do that. Be nice if it did. You can actually, with motion post-processing, get some of the curb feels if you bump this up all the way and change your gain in your motion post-processing. I'll get into that in a little bit. But it's still not as precise of a feeling that you would get with tactile transducers. So I wouldn't waste your time trying to set that up, because if you bump up your bump intensity all the way and then you have to accommodate some more gain in your motion processing, it throws all your other stuff off, where you're going to end up turning them way down. So it's just really not worth the hassle. Alright, so roll intensity, that's your vehicle rolls. Roll over side inclines like big curbs or bankings. That's what the roll intensity does. Heave, it handles your waves and dips on the track. So you see in the videos the guys getting pushed forward when they're going over dips and stuff. Set this, of course, to your individual liking. All of these to your individual liking. But I tend to, however I see the in-car settings, if I see my car moving around and my seat's not moving as much as that car is, or my seat's moving more than the car is moving on my display, then I adjust it accordingly. And you can have a bunch of these. So let's just say you like to use a McLaren GT3 as your favorite car. You can do a Project Cars 2 GT3, and while you're in game, activate actually each one as you go. You don't have to exit the game to activate, which is really, really cool. So for instance, I've played this one on an experiment. I use this pretty much for all of them. Except for dirt. It's not active enough for me for dirt. I want to be kind of chunked around a little bit more like you would be in dirt for real. So I actually go to my dirt profile, my Project Cars 2, I named it dirt, and then I'll go activate that one, and then boom, it just activates it automatically. Really cool setup how they do it. There's no explanation of how any of this software works, which I did contact them to ask them to send me something. And they haven't done it. I don't even know if they have anything published. So it'd be nice if they did. I think it would be a little bit more comfort level for people to get into motion if they kind of knew the ins and outs. It's kind of like sim experiences, sim vibe. There's really no explanation of all the vast things their software does. Hence that the learning curve is really huge on something like sim vibe. The learning curve on this one is not big at all. It's really easy and intuitive to figure out. So, but anyway, let's keep on going down the list here, getting sidetracked a little bit. Heave intensity, that handles your waves and dips on your track, like I said. The surge intensity, that one's pretty cool. That's your forward and back under acceleration and deceleration. So when you punch the throttle and your seat moves backwards from the acceleration, that's what surge intensity does. And then of course when you hit the brake and it pushes you into the steering wheel, that also handles the surge intensity. That intensity is the same whether you're getting pushed back in the seat or getting pushed forward in the seat rather. But I'm going to skip over the sway. When you go to your weight transfer bias, that actually will determine your surge bias, meaning that if you want to be pushed back in the seat more than you are pushed forward towards your steering wheel, you can change this to a negative value, and that means it's going to favor the surge of you going back in the seat under acceleration. But if you want to be neutral, rather, not much going backwards under acceleration, but you want more as far as going forwards under deceleration, braking, heavy braking, you can put this to a positive value. And you can default it at 1 or 0 rather in the middle. So really cool that you can change how you want your surge intensity to be more biased towards the front, or pushing you forward under braking, or pushing you back under acceleration. It's really cool. And actually, this software is actually sensitive enough that it pulls the telemetry of each car, right? So it's not like you get into a GT3 car and you're going to feel the same surge intensity that you get in a Formula One car. You're going to be slammed back in the seat in a Formula One car more so than you would in a GT3 car, and then hence, also even less than like a road car. But then in a road car, you're going to feel more roll intensity, more of the vehicle rolling through the curves and stuff. So pretty neat than you would in a GT car. So really cool that it picks all that up. But anyway, so sways your seat moving left or right when turning. So when you see your seat literally pushing you to the right or to the left when you're turning through a curve. So you're turning right through the curve and your seat's going to push you to the left from just, the G-forces, trying to replicate G-forces. That's what that one does. Alright, so I hope that explains most of it there, and let me get into the menu system of the software itself. Alrighty. Let's change the background. There's car. Something car, right? Alright, so here is the software. And here's tooling diagnostics. Here's the game integration, help center, action center, VR integration, global pause, and exit the program, or you can hit X up here. Now these load in all your games. Now you can type in a search command for your game if you had one of those people that have a ton of games. You can name each game as your favorite. So let's just say Dirt 4. If that was wanted that as my favorite, click on favorite, back to go back out of it. So here's these settings. All, only installed, favorites, VR, ready games, and only users. What's only users? Okay, that's just me. All is all the games that are supported on this. I wish you could actually make this dialog box bigger, but you can't. But this is all the games that it works with, which, if you wanted to know, you could come to the Next Level Racing website, go down to the V3 Motion, and I'll have all this typed up on my blog as well for the review, but I'll have a link in the description of this YouTube video to go to the blog as well. But this lists out all the games, which is quite an extensive list. Even F1 racing games from 2011 to 2017 in there. And they're adding games all the time. So that's a very important factor as well, is are they adding new games? They got Project Cars 1, Project Cars 2, R Factor 1, R Factor 2, Richard Burns Rally, if you could ever find it. I can't ever find it. The Crew, a bunch of flight sims that are on there, some in VR, some not. Some are now VR capable when this list that weren't when this list was made, actually. So yeah, a really extensive list. Basically every driving game that you'd want to play in sim racing is there, which is awesome. And then I would imagine, when we have a Project Cars 3, yada yada yada, you're going to have it, So that's this lists all of them. Only install is, of course, what you have installed on your system, and it also recognizes like the sequential shifter, handbrake, Clubsport pedals, devices. This is what's installed on my computer, which is odd, but it does recognize it. So let's just say you want to see what's VR ready. You're like, maybe I want to go get into flight. Well, let's see which one's VR, because I prefer racing or flying in VR only. It'll, of course, tell me which ones are VR only, whether I own them or it's just giving you the list of what's available. So I'm going to go on to my favorites, because these are all the ones I own, and just kind of point out some things. So obviously I went over Project Cars 2, right? This is all your settings. This is the default setting here. you can do a snapshot of this if you want, but when you download the software, everything defaults at 1, which is really active. Too much in most cases. Motion processing. This one's pretty interesting. You can almost chase your tail between motion post-processing and your motion, but this is basically after the fact. So if you want smooth rolling over the curves, you know, your roll intensity here, if you want it smooth, leave it at 6 and your gain at 0 and your offset at 0. But if you want to make it where I was saying you want to feel your curbing or your off-roading more intensive, you can bring it down and you'll see this graph change, right? And say like around, like I usually like around 109, 111 area. This is kind of intensive of a drop. Now your gain would be how much volume you got going to it. So your roll can go all the way up to 2, which means it's gonna chunk you around in the seat way too much. The gain I leave off on 1, and pretty happy with that. Now offset is, think of offset as when it drops off. So at 100%, this is your linearity gain, right? At 111, and the offset is how quick that the roll rolls off back to normal. Hope that makes sense. Now you want to set your roll and your pitch the same as what I discovered, because you don't want to be rolling side to side differently amount than you do pitch, but maybe you do. You know, experiment with it. But that's what that does. You could pretty much leave this post-processing alone for most cases and be pretty happy. But I like to feel, especially on, say, dirt racing, I want to feel a quick drop off or a more of a abrupt roll and pitch from the suspension. I'll turn this up, the linearity, or rather the linearity down, and turn the offset up a little bit, just so I have a little bit more of a quicker action in the motion rig itself instead of a slower, smoother action. You're making it either quicker or you're making it slower. That's the slowest. This will increase the quickness of it, the reaction time of it. So it's pretty cool, but you'll be probably pretty happy without messing with that. But you know, I like to tinker. All right, so VR. This is the same for all the games. VR. This is your roll compensation, your pitch, and your smoothness. I haven't had to mess with the roll or pitch at all. I left it at 1. However, I have had to mess with the smoothness. In Project Cars 2, everything was real jittery looking to me when I was, not at slow speeds, but at fast speeds. Everything was just moving up and down too much. So it would make you sick, right? So I had to punch it all the way up to 30. Really around from 20 and up was fine, but 30 was kind of the sweet spot for me. And everything smoothed out. Incidentally, on Project Cars 2, if I left it off, if I wasn't running, say, Daytona, where it had a really aggressive banking, I didn't need this VR compensation on for me. Same with Razer, didn't need it on. But once you got to the banking, the big heavy banking like at Daytona, my head was in the side window on screen, so then I needed it on for that. I didn't have to. I thought it was kind of neat, but it does help to make your experience a little bit more realistic, because your whole car would move, up the banking, not necessarily your head. Of course, G-forces would push your head over a little bit, because your head is actually pretty heavy in real life. So, all right, so tactile, and I hope I'm not boring y'all, but this is a lot of information to take in, so you can go back and check on this stuff when you get your rig, because you're going to want one. All right, gear intensity. This is your gear change intensity. It sets to 1. I actually still run SimVibe on the side as well, but SimVibe, I just use it for my gears. But again, this is one of those things where you can just turn up each one individually and test it out to see. I will show you what I do, experiment here. My tactile, my gear change intensity, you don't feel it unless you're up to 2.5. And because it's such a subtle hit, because you have so much going on in this menu system, your transducers can only do so much at one time. And being that you can only control, well, you can control 8 of them actually, but 8 of them all doing the same thing. It's not like you can individually control them like in SimVibe, to have 4 transducers just handling chassis and 2 transducers just handling engine vibrations and shifts. You can't divide it up like that as much. Well, actually you can somewhat, but the way I have it set up now, I can't. If I was to plug in all the transducers to the one sound card, then it would allow me to individually change things, but I didn't want to do that. So I have 4 transducers running chassis mode basically, and engine vibration, which incidentally the engine vibration on this is actually better than SimVibe, I think, because it changes it based on the load of your engine, which SimVibe does have that option as well, but in practice it doesn't work very well for me. This one worked flawlessly without me even having to jack with it. It was just a plug and play, worked really good, and really liked it. So for engine RPM, I really liked it better than SimVibe. Suspension frequency and all that, you can get it smoothed out a little bit better on SimVibe, which is good. But this one worked fine. I was pretty happy with it. So for what I do is I run it gear change on off. I don't want to fill it. I don't want to use up my 4 chassis transducers on shifting. I actually run my butt kicker that's on my shifter itself and the one that's on the back of my seat to fill the shifts. And then suspension frequency, I'm running those through this software, and it's running the 4 transducers. This wheel slip and the intensity is actually really cool. This sets your when you're spinning off the line, say a starting stop, you'll feel your transducers, and they'll feel different than what suspension is. Suspension you only feel when you're like going over curbing or really fast, rough surfaces. You'll feel the suspension, right? The bounce, rather, of your wheels over the curbing and stuff. But the wheel slip is you feel the wheel hop. You feel your tires bouncing off the ground trying to gain traction. That is really cool, and you can really dial it in to feel when your back end's getting loose. Now this program it's not a 3-way, right? It's a 2 DOF, 2 degrees of freedom. If you had the third one on ones like Sim Experience, you'll feel your whole rig slide to the right or left when you're spinning out. Well, since this doesn't have that, it has a really good, this wheel slip intensities and frequency is actually really good at letting you know, because you see on screen that your car's rotating around you, right? But then you feel it too immediately at the same time. So you actually feel it a little bit quicker than you see it, or it's instantaneously, really. It's right there, and you can turn up the intensity to feel it. If you're someone that didn't want to feel any curbing through this, but you really want to concentrate on wheel slip intensity, just have this on, and you'll feel exactly when it kicks in. So it's really, really cool. I like it. I'm impressed with that. That's something that SimVibe does have, but I had no luck with it working. But this one worked flawlessly, so it's great. Now heave, just like the heave over here in the motion, does the same thing for the tactile. Does the same thing. I don't want my motion rig and my transducers to be doing it at the same time, so I turn the heave off. Same with the rev limiter intensity. That'll start vibrating when you're hitting the red line. I turn it off. I don't need it, because if you have this checked here, rev limiter on motion platform, you'll get this fast judder, forward backwards judder, as if you ever been in a real car, a real sports car, and you've hit red line. Some cars, road cars rather, it will just cut all spark, and your car will literally do a nosedive when you're going, say, hit 100 miles an hour. It does a nosedive. Some cars will actually feel like they're sputtering. It's cutting spark, bringing spark back in, cutting spark, bringing spark back in, so you don't fill your cylinders up with fuel, right? So I believe that's how it's working. But this replicates that, so it's really badass. Excuse my language, but it's freaking awesome, guys, that feel that, and it comes on aggressively, and no matter if you're leaning and banking or whatever, when it comes on, you're bouncing off the rev limiter. So it's kind of a neat little telltale, like, shoot, I need to shift, man, and kind of like you would use displays, to alert you, or shift lights on your rig to alert you, hey, you need to shift, you know. That's what this does. And it comes on exactly on time, which is awesome. So I love this software. The software is incredible. Now, just to dive a little bit further in the software, not to try to bore you too much, but if you're a geek like me, you're going to love this, okay? So when you get to Race Room, it does all the same things, but it adds the motion for the wheel slip intensity. So when you're just like this this limiter kicks in when you're bouncing off the rev limiter, which is basically a forward and backwards motion in your seat, the wheel slip intensity, I don't know how it does it, but it's really freaking cool. It does this, it's almost as like it's pushing you up from the bottom of the seat, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, really fast. I mean, really fast. And it feels like a wheel hop. It feels like your rear end is hopping. Now, if you have a front wheel drive car, you'll get that too. Same thing under intense braking. When your ABS, if you don't have ABS on, and you get that wheel hop, that chirp, 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 when you're braking, that replicates it. And it's freaking awesome, guys. I love this feature. So in Race Room, when you're taking off, for instance, and you're gunning it off the line, you're spinning the tires, you feel that wheel hop, right? You can ease off the gas to modulate your gas just enough where the wheel hop goes away and you start gaining traction, and you feel that slip effect just fade away as you ease off the gas. And this is really cool, very intuitive, and I haven't seen anybody talk about this yet. Actually, there's not a lot of videos on this motion simulator anyways, but this is money, man. This is really, really good. So highly love this software. I hope this comes to the rest of the games, but right now it is in Assetto Corsa, which is another one of my favorite games, and it's in Race Room as well. Another brilliant sim racing game. On top of that, you do have the tactile feedback as well, so you can have that kicking in too. I have this turned down really far down because in Race Room, it's like overdone, and it may have to do with something that's already being handled in the motion. Maybe the same signal trying to be split up between the motion and the tactile transducers, you know, because it probably piggybacks off each other, but it comes really amplified in the transducer. So I turn it really far down, like 0.07 for the intensity, and it's just enough to, when I am sliding the rear end of the car around the curve, around this lower intensity, I feel the slide of it hopping. So really cool. Of course, obviously VR, same thing. Smoothness I have down on 1. All right, so that's I had to take a breath here. So anyway, this is really good software. I'm hoping you get something out of this. I hope I covered everything in the software that's really needs to be. Oh, you know what? Let me cover tools and diagnosis. This is kind of neat too. You can park it, center it. Let me go back here. What that does is when you pause the game, it parks it. So it has these magnets in the motor. It's all electrical stuff, I guess. It haven't got a clear indication. What pushes this? Is this hydraulics in there? I don't see any hydraulics. I believe it's just a big electric motor. And so when it parks it, so let's say you're on the Daytona banking, and you're sideways in the car, and you hit pause. Well, you're still sideways. It parks it on pause. Parks it exactly wherever you're at. If you're leaning far to the left, it parks it right there. But if you wanted to recenter it when you pause it, that's what you do. It'll center you back up to center. I leave it parked on pause there because I think it's neat. But that's what that does. All right, so let me go to tools. That's the park it and center it. Activate your platform. What does that do? Yeah, mine's platform does not require activation. Software configuration. This is where I was talking about in the very beginning of the video. For everything it does, changing your main screen from game profiles to platform dashboard. I leave it on game profiles. Everything else is pretty much filled in for you. The only thing I just recently turned on was enable force feedback plugin experimental. I don't know what it does. I just turned it on and I haven't seen anything different, but I haven't run the software yet. All right, so if you know, tell me. hardware configuration, haven't had to do anything with this. Work envelope scaling. Below sliders allow you to quickly limit motion platform work envelope. The limit does not apply to platform diagnostic controls. So left-right scaling, I think that's just a scaling of you getting 100% or less of a percentage of motion. Level calibration, I have tried that just to see what it does. It's just to re-level it. So really it comes level from the factory, but that's what it does. Game integration, that of course is all your games. So let's say you install a new game on here. Say you didn't have Dirt 4, but you installed Dirt 4. It'll go on here and you see like Dirt 4, reinstall, it's already installed, right? If I just installed it, this would say, what would it say? It would say install, and it's not, you know, it's found. It would say found, and you have to click install. So that's what that's for. And it'll actually come up in your action center to do it. If you install a new game that the motion software supports, it'll come up. So really cool. Let me see, that's the game. Kinematics diagnostics, I have no idea what this does, so I'm not going to pretend I do. If you know, let me know. Tactile feedback configuration, this is important. If you're not running tactile feedback, you know, obviously why have it enabled? I have it enabled the system. Let's just say you're running at nighttime, your wife's trying to go to sleep. I'll turn it off because the motion rig is so quiet. My wife can sleep at night, you know, 4 feet from me and not be bothered by it. But your transducers are so loud, you got to close the door when you're in the room, so it doesn't bother someone else in the other room. So the system itself is really quiet. I'll try to throw up a video in this video as well to show you how quiet it is, but it's super quiet. You don't hear it. Even transducers you don't hear when you have your headphones on, but the motion certainly you do not hear at all. So yeah, I like it. So anyway, here's your channels. It's telling you it'll take up to 8 output channels. Tactile feedback system generates 7 source signals which can be mixed and played to any combination of 8 output channels. If you have one tactile transducer device, you can map all the signal sources to the same channel. So since I have a 2-channel amp going to this, it automatically defaulted to engine and chassis. And when you click on this, you'll feel them vibrate. And you can divide it up to left and right. I actually have mine in series and in abridged mode to get more power to my transducers. So I have just left side and right side, so I didn't divide up the channels, and that's why you see it like you see it. But I would imagine front left, front right, right left, right right, rear right rather, rear left, front right, front left, sorry. And then chassis is just all of those combined is what that is. And obviously engine. Center, I don't know what center. Oh, center for a center channel. So I just run chassis and engine just because the way I have it hooked up. And you see a diagram of how it works, right? Center and all that. So really easy. Pick the sound card that you're running. It recognizes, you know, it pulls up all the sound cards that you have on your system. Pick the one that you're using. I'd already named mine Simbad chassis, so that's the one I used. Simple. Run through it. It's good. Tactile feedback diagnosis. That's just a diagnose what's going on with your transducers. I haven't looked at it. Hadn't need to. Show tutorial. This is what I showed you in the very beginning. But you know, if you didn't do a screenshot like me and you want to, you know, go back and read it, you can go through this next, and pull up your online and all that. Update software. It'll tell you when you need to update it. OBD2 simulator configuration. Don't know. I don't use it. Don't know what it does. It's for advanced users. I'm obviously not an advanced user, so I don't know what it does. If you know, explain it below in the video. I wouldn't mind learning. So you can obviously, you know, email them and they'll tell you what it does. But you know, I didn't really need it, so I didn't need to know. Dashboard diagnostics. This is really cool. So you can have this and G meter up, and let's just say you're not using VR and you could actually see this stuff. while you're out there racing. But these are 2 dashboards you can leave up, and it's telling you, you know, your RPM, your water temp, your map, your TPS, position that you are on the track, all this stuff going on in one spot, which is really cool. And you can toggle it to stay on top, so it stays on top of your game on your screen no matter what. And same thing with your G meter, you can see your G's going. I play in VR. It doesn't show up on VR in the VR screen, so keep that in mind. It'd be nice if it did, actually. I would like to see the G's that it's trying to simulate, you know, when I'm doing things. That would be pretty cool. So I hope maybe one day they'll update the software to where you can see this in VR, but right now you do not. All right, so that's it for the software. Whew, that's a mouthful. It took a while to go through all this. So I hope you in global pause and exit program. That's pretty self-explanatory. I hope this helped you. Next up, we'll show you it in motion and in game, and I will dub over what I am feeling in the game. It's really cool, the things that this software mimics. The power of this simulation rig is that it's such a small form factor. You wouldn't think it would be as powerful as it is, but it really is. It'll chunk me around fine, enough to where I feel like I'm going to be chunked out of the seat. As you saw, my software settings were turned quite a bit down on the motion here because I didn't need it that high. But yeah, it's really good. So even for heavier set people, you know, not to worry. It's going to have plenty of motor strength to push you around. Especially if you're using their GT Ultimate seat, which is wider for a wider waistband of a person, so to speak. So I got a smaller waist, and so I don't have that problem with the seat I have. But I would like to try out their seat, though. It looks freaking comfortable, but I don't have it. I'm using my R seat, so it fits pretty snug, similar to like something like a Sparko would or something like that. So and it's very light, so I can turn things down a little bit more because I don't have an extra heave of a seat. So all right, one more little thing. I just heard it. My motion rig, you'll hear it when you're sitting here stationary. The fan will kick on for a second and then go right back on. Alright, so after this long-winded review here, I hope you've enjoyed it. Let's go over the quick pros and cons of this system here. Pros so far, it's easy to adapt to any rig. Virtually any rig, this thing you can adapt it to with a little bit of ingenuity. It's got a small form factor, which actually also makes it helpful if you wanted to resell it later in the future, being if you got out of sim racing as opposed to having a really big setup. Software is continually being updated with features and games. I even contacted them and they talked about the tactile feature being a fairly new feature, and they do plan on adding it to the more of the games in the future, so that's great. They got great customer service after the sale. Like I said, when I contact them, they always get back to me within 24 hours with my questions answered. It's got many ways to purchase the unit through well-known retailers like your Amazon, your Newegg, Ricmotech, Dale, even places like that. So easy to finance this $3,000 system. VR compensation works beautifully, works really good. I only had problems when I was dropping frame rate, and that's why I was having some issues here and there. Nothing to do with the VR compensation, just computer lagging. Easy to learn software. I went through that extensively for y'all. Plays very well with VR and SimVibe. You just literally launch the game through the software itself. It'll ask you if you want to launch it through Steam VR or Oculus VR. Pick the one you want to do and launches the game. Very easy to do. Of course, the added tactile feature, that's a plus, so you don't have to run SimVibe. And once they open up the rest of the addition of tactile features to like R-Factor 2 and iRacing and stuff, it'll, you could virtually eliminate SimVibe if you wanted to, but don't get rid of it just yet. SimVibe, it has a little bit more features, but this works really well. Okay, the traction loss motion and tactile feature, that's a huge plus. Even though this is 2 degrees of motion, those features there really make up for the fact that you're not sliding your unit left or right when you lose traction. You can totally tell when you lose traction and play with it like that, especially off the starting line where you're wheel hopping the rear end of it. It's really neat feeling. The immersion factor is increased to 100% with VR, tactile, and motion together. It's the synchronization of all three. It really brings everything to come together. You will get lost in your sim racing experience when you add motion to it, especially when you're in VR, because everything else is closed off to you in the world. There's lots of many other pros to list, but the show must go on, and let's get on to just the limited list of cons that I have. Okay, so let's get on to the cons. There's not a lot of them here. Basically right now, there's no published software instructions. You're going to have to depend on YouTubers like myself, or just, trial and error for yourself. Now, the software is very intuitive and pretty easy to understand with the diagrams that they have. So, but that is a con. There's nothing published to help everybody understand what's going on. But yeah. Also, not all racing sims have the tactile feedback feature, nor do all of them have the traction loss motion feature like, say, Assetto Corsa and Racerim have at this time. Those two are the only games that have the motion loss, or the traction loss in motion, which is phenomenal. And once you experience it, you're going to want all of the sims to have it, so they did an excellent job there. So I wish more had it. But yeah, it is what it is. And actually, also another con, the last con, is it only utilizes one sound card at this time. Now, as a note, I have been told that the new feature, there are new features in multiple sound cards being worked on for future release. So that's great to hear. So no fear, there is more great things coming for this software, which is a testament that they continually try to improve and listen to their customers about their product, how to advance it. So very, very nice. I'm very pleased with this software and the motion sim racing. So let me get into my final notes next, and we'll close this one out. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this review. and it did take some time, so thank you for staying to the very end of it all. So my conclusion of the Next Level Racing V3 Motion is it's amazing. It works great. I just love it. Now, I haven't been provided this from anybody. I bought it with my own money, so no swayed decision of any kind, or being extra happy that someone gave me a motion rig to review and already put me in a positive mood. So I was positive once I started putting everything together. So anyway, things I love about this, that stand out to me is the rev limiter feature, and the fact that you got the traction loss feature in motion, unlike a Assetto Corsa and Race Room, as well as tactile traction loss in most of the other sim racing games. Now, more is coming, like I mentioned before, because it is a new feature, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of that being added to the rest of the sims. Also love that when you're on a bank, say here at Daytona, everything works seamlessly together. When you're banking, your seat's pushed over to the left, going around the bank, and you hit the rev limiter, you feel the distinctive feature of the rev limiter. You feel traction loss when you have traction loss. You feel dips in the tracks, impacts, all that. You feel it all separately. It's very unique. Nothing's muddled. Everything is precise and feels great. Also, another mention is that I've run this thing for 4 hours at a time, just before my butt finally gave out from sitting there, and no loss in performance. If you're running tactile transducers by themselves, say on SimVibe, you've experienced where you'll have an amp go out or overload and then cut out and lose some of that tactile feature that you may be running with that particular sound card and amp. This one, I haven't had that problem at all. And of course, the other, you can alleviate some of that by dividing up your frequencies amongst your transducers. But anyway, go see my how-to videos on SimVibe. It should be pretty informative for you. But this, no degradation in performance, which is a huge plus for me. And yeah, at hour 4, felt just the same as minute 1 when I was using this rig. So besides that, I was really worn out by that time. But anyway, that's all I got to say about this. For the conclusion, it's a great buy. If you're into motion, I think you should, or wanting to get into motion, I think you should give Next Level Racing V3 a look. And it's really easy to obtain through different retailers and stuff. So makes it easy to get and super easy to set up, as you could see in the video that I had, or in the previous parts of this video. So anyway, watch the rest of this video and I'll see you on the track. I'm out.